Hey, what is up everybody? This is Rob, and if you are watching this video, first off, I want to say thank you because most likely you are looking into buying your first firearm. I say that because usually a handgun is the essentially first way to kind of dip your toe into the water of firearm ownership. I do applaud you for that. I know that California is not the most gun-friendly state, but I do believe it is very important that we all have the right to defend ourselves and we all have the necessary tools to defend ourselves. So, on to that, let's go ahead and let's talk about the handguns because, well, it's a little bit different here in California if you want to own a handgun. Okay, so if you're like me, it probably went like this, right? You decided you want to buy a handgun, you went online, you found all these handguns that you really like, and you narrowed it down to exact one you want. However, there's a thing, you might not be able to buy it in California, and that is due to the California handgun roster. And let's kind of go into the history of the roster a little bit so you can understand where I'm coming from. So in order for a pistol to be on the roster, it does have to follow a few rules. First few are reasonable, but then it gets a little bit ridiculous. For example, it does have to pass a drop safe test, which is fine. It does have to pass a discharge and malfunction test, fine. However, then here's the thing. These pistols have to be modified, and this is why you'll sometimes see they're a little bit different than the non-California versions. The pistol has to have an external safety, a loaded chamber indicator, and a magazine disconnect. What are those? External safety means that the pistol must have an external safety, as the name implies. Of course, this does already count Glock out. Now, this is a problem because Glock, they don't mess with their formulas, so that means that we're probably never going to see a new Glock model in California as long as the roster is in existence. Now, right now, Glock is still selling, their older pistols here, but only up to Gen 3 because they were essentially grandfathered in when the roster came into existence. So that kind of sucks because Gen 5 is what everyone else has in the United States, and there are a lot of really nice new Glock models that I would have loved to have owned, but they're not on the roster, so I probably won't. Loaded chamber indicator is essentially a metal fin you'll see on top of the slide. And when there is round in the chamber, the fin will raise. Usually it's also like bright orange. And the point is supposed to be that at a glance you can tell if the chamber is loaded. And then we also have the magazine disconnect, which is essentially a mechanism in the grip that prevents your firearm from firing when there is not a magazine in the magwell. This is a problem because there could still be a round in the chamber, but it won't fire. Now, people are very against that because you never know if it might, one day malfunction, and you might have a magazine in there, but the gun won't think there is and it won't want to fire, which in a life or death situation is a big problem. So these requirements, again, they are a little excessive, but some gun makers were still working around them. Smith & Wesson, for example, they were still selling, their California version of the Shield here, which was pretty cool. It just had, of course, the LCI, magazine disconnect, and the external safety. But then here's the real kicker. A couple years later, and please remember the DOJ roster stuff was basically mid 2000s. But a couple years later, it was decided they want to add one more thing to the list. And this is what really killed it for everyone here in California. They wanted to add a microstamping system. So essentially, someone made up a patent where when you shoot the gun, either the hammer or striker, they will essentially microstamp part of the serial number to the casing of the bullet. The idea is that, say a crime was committed, police can go to a crime scene, they find all these shell casings on the ground. Great, the shell casing has the serial number of the handgun it came out of on it, and now they can track down the, felon. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work like that, obviously, because a lot of times the guns that are used in crimes are stolen or just not even belonging to theirs, which is very unfortunate because obviously no one's done that before. No handgun manufacturer has managed to actually do a microstamping sort of system in their handguns. And due to this, for the longest time, we had quite the drought of, essentially guns being added to the roster. I mean, at the end of the day, a firearm is a firearm. As long as it's a good, dependable firearm, you're fine. When I bought my first firearm, again, the roster was 100% in effect. It's microstamping and everything. I'll get onto that in a little bit. So for me, the best choice was my Glock 19 Gen 3, because like I said, no Gen 5s. It is clear. I did upgrade this one just a little bit. Thrown some nice Hackathorn sights on it, flashlight, and then an extended magazine release as well as Talon grips. And it's a good choice. You know, we still had some good choices. It just kind of sucked because we didn't get a lot of the new things. And something you'll notice is I want to say around maybe 2015 or 16 and up, we started kind of going towards, more of a CCW focus of handguns. So we got a lot of really nice, new additions, to the handgun market that we were not able to buy. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. So what if you don't want something on the roster? What if you want something off roster? Well, for civilians like me and maybe you, we can't really go into a gun store and just buy one brand new. However, there are two ways we can buy them. One, if you are law enforcement, then you are allowed to buy them. Or two, if say you lived out of state, we'll just say random state, you lived in Michigan. While you were in Michigan, you bought all these pistols, and then you come here to California. If I remember correctly, you might have to modify them a little bit to still make them allowed to be registered in California, but you're able to bring them in. Now, those are the two main ways to get them. You can also do family transfers. I believe it's if your parents live in another state, they can buy the pistol and transfer it over to you. A little bit of a process because you basically have to do an FFL ship to ship and a few other little, nuances like that. But for us, the main way is that we have to buy it used from any of those aforementioned parties. This does mean that there is a bit more of a markup on them. When it comes to off-roster stuff, sometimes they can expect to pay between 50 to 150% more. So here's an example. This is my LCP2 in 380, clear. Now, I paid about $500 for this gun. You could probably get one brand new in another state that has them, legally for about 280 to 300. So I did have to pay a premium in order to have this. Of course, I could always sell this off and get my money back anyways. But it's just an example that you will have to pay quite a bit. It's not uncommon to see people selling, for example, $2,500 staccatos for like $4,000 here in California. It's insane, guys. Just insane. Let's fast forward now. 2023, we did have a big, big change to the roster. So they finally realized, hey, microstamping isn't a physically feasible thing to do to handguns. So due to that, some really great legal groups were able to make some moves in the court, and we were able to get the microstamping requirement off of the roster. Now, with that off of the roster, this did mean that firearm manufacturers would have an easier time if they wanted to add a new handgun to it. Yes, it would have to have a magazine disconnect, loaded chamber indicator, as well as an external safety, but we can have it. Now, the first the first major company that made this move was SIG. They brought over the P320, the M18 model, which was a Glock 19 competitor, and then that kind of opened up the floodgates. We've had a lot of really nice models coming in ever since then. Smith & Wesson really stepped up and they released a lot of really cool things. We have the M&P 2.0, both full-size and compact, as well as the Shield Plus, such as the one you saw earlier. That was a California roster Shield Plus. Ruger did release the 22 version of the LCP2 that I showed, but I do have the off-roster creative version. A few others, and then SIG. Like I said, we were going into a really nice trend towards smaller CCW-focused guns. So SIG brought in the P365 to California. That was a very big deal. And they are releasing a few new versions of it here too. As well as Springfield brought out their Hellcat and Hellcat Pro models, which was also really cool. It's definitely changed sort of the marketplace vibe of, the forums, for example, where people buy guns in California. Because a lot of the off-roster stuff, you will see some of the prices have gone down because now we could buy an on-roster version. Now that we have gone over the California handgun roster and the limitations you may have getting a firearm in California, mainly a handgun, let's go ahead and talk about the options. First off, you do want to decide, what is this pistol going to be for? It's going to be for home defense. Are you going to carry it? Do you want something that can do both? Will you be focusing just on carrying it? It's also sometimes worth considering like your own style in terms of what do you wear, because sometimes let's say you wear slacks and a button up every day to work. That might influence, the size of the gun that you're going to want to carry. Because remember, concealed means concealed. You got to make sure that no matter what you're wearing, nobody can see it. Not everyone's going to be wearing an oversized sweatshirt all the time, so a larger gun might not fit you. But you also might be a much bigger guy, so you can carry a full size pretty comfortably. So really do first consider that. So let's go into sort of what are my recommendations and what are some of the main ones you'll see online. So let's say you want to go full size, maybe it's just for home defense, something like that. Well, you could always look at the Glock 17 Gen 3. That's always a very popular one. The thing with Glocks is they're not 100% exceptional, but they do everything well enough, and they're also very reliable. That's why I chose my Glock 19. It's a very reliable handgun. When it comes to Glocks, the triggers, safety check, the triggers are always going to be a flip of a coin if it's really good or not. Mine's not too bad in my opinion. And I have broken in and put about 1,200 rounds through it, so I do have a nice, take up and pull. And the reset, not bad at all. So that is always an option, in terms of full size, especially if you want to know like what are some of the newer things that have came out. I mean, the M&P 2.0, that is the full size, that is the new hotness right now. It's more of a 1911 grip angle versus a Glock grip angle. And some people do prefer that. For me, my first real firearm experiences were with a Glock, so I'm just kind of used to that more aggressive Glock angle. So it is more aggressive, For me, it's easier to point, and that's why I really like it. And I'm just used to it. Of course, I can still shoot my Shield Plus, which is the same, M&P 2.0 grip angle just fine as well. I do have to adjust my pointing a little bit more with that one versus the Glock. But that's just how it works. Those are two full-size ones. Beretta does have one or two pistols that have been grandfathered in. There is also some of the older SIGs, for example, the P226. That's a really, really nice, hammer-fired, dual-action, single-action gun. I really enjoyed shooting that. It's nice and old school. It feels good and heavy in the hand. If I could find a good deal on one, I definitely want to pick one up. You could also look at the CZ options. People have been really, jumping onto the CZ train. So if you want a full size, that would be the SP01. Has a nice ergonomic look to it. Has sort of that, I'm just, because that's the first thing in my mind, sort of that same, like Beretta ergonomic look to it. It's a nice gun. So you want to go a little bit smaller than that. Well, like I said, maybe you do want to carry it sometimes, but you still want it to be home defense. The Glock 19 Gen 3 is perfect for that, and there's a reason why it is so widely bought and everyone loves it. There is also, I did talk about CZ earlier, the P01. SIG does have the P320 M18 that I mentioned earlier, was one of the first new roster additions. There are a few other choices as well, but those are the three main ones I really see recommended for California. Yeah, you don't really see the other ones being mentioned too often. But what if you want to go a little bit smaller, focus a little more on the CCW side. So we go that way. I mean, that's where the real excitement of the roster stuff. I mean, you got the Shield Plus, which is really nice. You have the P365, couple different models that are coming out, different variations. Do remember that you buy the base P365, you can always just change out the slides as well as, the barrel and the grips on your own if you really want to sort of make it your own. So you don't have to buy one of the more expensive variations. You can build that yourself off of a base P365. And then we do also have the Hellcat and Hellcat Pro. Hellcat Pro is a little bit bigger. If I remember correctly when I looked it up online, it's a little bit smaller than the 19. If I remember, the slide pretty much goes up to, I want to say, where the sight ends right here. And for some people, that's a pretty nice little compromise as well. And then, of course, maybe you want something extra small, essentially a fanny pack carry kind of thing, or something to really carry in your pocket. You could just make do with the smallest P365. That's really small. Or do like me, and that's when I had to get the off-roster LCP380. But they do sell a 22 version of the LCP2 you could buy for that. Or the SIG P238, which is really nice. This basically looks like a mini 1911. That's also 380. Those are some of the more popular options for all the different, essentially, classes of handguns that I'm noticing people are buying the most here in California. So you decided, I want one of these, maybe you have a top 3 handguns. Number one thing I do is go to a range that rents them out. There are some ranges that do. Sometimes you may need to bring a friend or actually have your own handgun on you. This is to deter, unfortunately, a recent rise in people taking their own lives at gun ranges. They're able to rent a gun and essentially get it taken care of, which is very unfortunate. So when you do rent a handgun, that's really the best way to really get a feel of it. Yeah, you could hold all the handguns at the store, but until you shoot it, you'll really know, what fits you best. When you do choose a gun store to buy it from, do shop around, guys. Do a bit of price hunting. Now, the big box stores here in California are usually going to be the cheapest. However, the local gun stores, usually there'll be a better experience. So for example, my 1911 I had mentioned earlier, I had bought it on sale from a big box store. I got there at 9 a.m. right when they opened. I didn't walk out till about 1 p.m. Their process was so slow. And I had maybe 4 people in front of me. It took maybe an hour to do one person. Local gun store, you can be in and out within a half hour, 45 minutes if you know exactly what gun you want. But of course, being out to a local gun store, you will get a more personal experience. But of course, also do remember that price does also matter, of course. So maybe your time, you're willing to give that up for a better price. Sometimes it's not a big difference, sometimes it is. For example, when the P365 first came out, there was a local gun store near me selling it for about $899.99. And you could have bought it from the local big box store for $679.99. That's a pretty substantial difference, especially when you add in tax and a draws fee. So there you have it, guys, a quick and basic tutorial on, what to look for when you're buying your first handgun in California. Do keep in mind, some of these items I did kind of gloss over kind of quickly. You may want to, really dive into some of these things. For example, buying an off-roster handgun if you're not just a normal civilian and you think you may have a way to get it. You really look into that on your own, guys. And also, thank you for watching. This is my first video on the channel. I really just want to talk about how it is to own firearms in California. I might do one next on, on rifle limitations, fingers, mag locks, and all that. Please let me know if you're interested in that. So with that, guys, this is Rob, and have a good one.